with it looking more and more likely that Jay Hill will be departing BYU for Michigan. Is it officially time for Cougar fans to panic? I don't think so.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And thank you for making all of us over here at Locked On, America's #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we are talking about Jay Hill's departure for Michigan, which looks increasingly likely. Why is it not the end of days for the BYU football program? We'll get into that. Then we're going to talk about, I think we need to retrain the mindset when it comes to being a BYU fan, especially in light of what's going on with Jay Hill and this program. We'll explain exactly what I mean by that, and then we'll finish up today's show looking at the likelihood of BYU getting ravaged via the transfer portal and why I actually think BYU is going to come out in many respects ahead versus behind, and we'll cover all of it ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Rougiette. This episode is brought to you by Rougiette. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. Get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette ready, feel present, feel confident, feel ready. All right, so Jay Hill, if he's not the defensive coordinator at Michigan soon, I will be absolutely flabbergasted because both the reporting out there and via my own sources, I have all but confirmed that Jay Hill will be at Michigan and will be the defensive coordinator on Kyle Whittingham's staff in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So that obviously is one thing, because losing Jay Hill is a blow to the BYU football program. There's just no denying that. I'm not going to try and spin it any other way than it would be a blow to the BYU football program, because in his 3 seasons at BYU, they've been absolutely remarkable in so many different respects. Think about how bad and how moribund BYU's defense was right before he arrived in Provo. And over the last 3 seasons, he's transformed them into an annual top 25 caliber defense, particularly when it comes to scoring defense. He has been a revelation. He has brought a whole lot to the BYU football program. But let me also add this. With Jay Hill off to Michigan, I am not fretting that BYU is suddenly going to be sinking to the bottom of the Big 12. Why? Well, Kalani Sitake. Now, let me explain a little bit about what Kalani Sitake has meant to the BYU football program. All he has done throughout his time at BYU is strive every single day to make BYU into what it is today. Think about this. They just finished a 12-2 campaign, and I said it on our postcast edition shortly after that Pop-Tarts Bowl win final, that this is a top 5 type season in BYU football history. Yes, we're talking about 84. We're talking about 96. We're even including last year, maybe the likes of 1983, some of those illustrious seasons of yesteryear in BYU football history. But we just went through one of the best single seasons in BYU football history. And yes, Jay Hill played a key role in all of it, but the guy at the helm of all of that is Kalani Sitake. And Kalani Sitake's track record over his past 3 coordinator hires, going back to the Jeff Grimes hire, then elevating Aaron Roderick to offensive coordinator, and then hiring Jay Hill away from Weber State to be his associate head coach and defensive coordinator, have all been absolute home run hires. I don't think you can say any other way that they were great hires. That's why I trust that if Jay Hill is going to leave BYU, and like I said, it looks very, very likely if it's not done already by the time you listen and or watch this podcast, well, get ready for it. I believe that Kalani Sitake will find an adequate option to replace him, whether that's on the staff that's currently at BYU, because there's a bevy of guys like Kelly Poppinga, Justin Enna, previously have defensive coordinating experience. Chad Kauha'aha'a, who's the senior defensive analyst, also has some coordinating experience in his background as well. You also could look at a guy like Gennaro Guilford, even though Gennaro has been rumored to maybe be an option to go to Michigan with Jay Hill. Could he be a guy that you elevate to DC to keep him in place in Provo? There are options internally. There's also options on the outside. I mentioned this on Postcast on Saturday as well. Think of guys like Pete Kwiatkowski, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He recently the defensive coordinator at Texas under Steve Sarkisian, also had an incredible run at the University of Washington as well as Boise State. Then you also have Justin Wilcox, for example, who just recently got let go by the Cal Bears as their head coach. He is considered one of the premier defensive minds in all of college football. These are guys that Kalani Sitake has connections to via his network. Kalani is a guy that I don't know how many people understand this, is as gregarious and is loved in the coaching community as he is in wider society. I hope that makes sense. He is a guy that goes to these conventions, these retreats with other coaches. And as I understand it, he's the life of the party. He is as well-respected and loved and revered as any coach out there in many respects. So he absolutely will be able to work through his network and find an option out there that I think will maybe not completely replace Jay Hill. They may come in with a different philosophy. It may tweak the defensive scheme. It may ultimately change their terminology and how they do things. But I trust that Kalani Sitake will get this hire right, or he'll go down swinging with it. Kalani has proven that, yes, he knows how far BYU has come since he took over as head coach. He obviously was saddled with Ty Detmer as his offensive coordinator out of the chute. And after 2 years, he jettisons BYU's Heisman Trophy winner and says, this ain't working. And yes, he tried to make it work with Ed Lamb and Elisa Tuiaki as long as he absolutely could. And when he finally realized it was completely broken, he made the pivot to Jay Hill. Kalani deserves the trust, the respect, and the belief from Cougar Nation that he will replace Jay if indeed Jay is off to Michigan, and ultimately will bring a guy or guys in, depending on how many staff positions are open, that will come in and continue to just kind of pick up the baton and keep things rolling for BYU. I wholeheartedly believe that Kalani Sitake knows what it takes to succeed at a high level at BYU, because we don't see this program going 23-4 over the past 2 years without his leadership at the helm of this program. And you better believe he's not going to let it sink back any further than he believes it should. And with a lot of the talent that it feels like is coming into this program, think about the recruiting uptick BYU took over the past 2 to 3 seasons. They had a top 25 class, this most recent class. And yes, you're probably thinking, well, if Jay Hill leaves, could that class fall apart? It very well could. But my belief is that Kalani Sitake knows the talent that's inbound to BYU, and it'll be a major selling point to whoever he interviews and ultimately hires as his new defensive coordinator with Jay Hill off to Ann Arbor. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm going to be completely wrong. Maybe you look back at this in a couple years' time and say, wow, how wrong that was. But I also got to say that the track record, at least over the past 5, 6, 7 years for Kalani Sitake, he's proven to be pretty good at bringing in top shelf coaches and, more importantly, top shelf coordinators who can help BYU and have helped elevate BYU to the position it's in today. Now, there is something in addition to this conversation that we need to have about the mindset Cougar fans have regarding BYU athletics in this day and age. You got to understand, BYU is no longer one of the little sisters of the poor, to use one of those famous quotes that we hear in college football all the time. BYU, they're a bona fide Power 4 program, and I think we all need to adjust our mindset to realize that reality. We'll get into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Rougiette. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life, literally anything. It doesn't switch off at night. And then when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take back control. It is a next-generation prescription treatment created to both support the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. It combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue and absorbs fast. The science behind Rougiette Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. And it's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch to Rougiette. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. That's Rougiette Ready. Feel present, feel confident, and of course, feel ready. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you, as always, for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. And if you want to take the next step as a true everydayer on this podcast, join our new Everydayer Club. It includes access to an ad-free audio feed for all Locked On Cougars episodes compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. An invite to our members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. And the best part is, if you're hanging out in the Discord like I like to do, kind of feels like Twitter of yesteryear. If you know what I'm talking about, it's a great way to interact with other fans and obviously talk all things BYU. If you want to be a part of this and upgrade to a whole lot more when it comes to being a part of the Everydayer Club, go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so let's talk about BYU in this day and age of college football, because the reaction to Jay Hill that I have gotten both via social media, emails, some of you in our insiders group and the like, is that there's a sense of panic that Jay Hill leaving BYU could absolutely leave the Cougars completely vulnerable, and suddenly they're looking at the 4-9 type season that we had in 2017. The reason why I don't believe that to be the case, and the reason why I think that the panic is actually pretty overblown, quite frankly, is because BYU has top shelf money to spend. I know that money doesn't equal everything, and that's never going to be the complete answer at BYU at being a church affiliated school. I'll be very clear about that as well. But BYU can now pay top shelf salaries. Kalani Sitake is reportedly going to be the second highest paid coach in the Big 12 Conference. Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, is the only one who makes more than him. He's making a shade over 10 million. I think it's like $10.5 million. Kalani Sitake is somewhere in that $8.5 to $9.5 million range, according to those reports. BYU is paying top shelf money for top shelf coaches, and that includes their coordinators. Jay Hill reportedly was somewhere around $2 million, as I understand it. And I would assume that Aaron Roderick, right in that same realm. So BYU, in theory, should Jay Hill be moving on from Michigan, and I understand that Kalani Sitake, when he went about this whole renegotiation of his new contract, the new extension he got after the Penn State situation, he was looking out for the people around him, and that means his assistant coaches. That, in theory, should bring the type of money that would attract a Power 4 level type coordinator. I'm not saying it's a sitting Power 4 coordinator that BYU can bring in, but why couldn't they in retrospect? Because if you can pay $2 million for a defensive coordinator, it's kind of the going rate for pretty dang good coordinators in this day and age. The other thing is BYU is going to have enough money, apparently, to be a real force in the transfer portal via NIL, revenue share, and the like. So everything screams that BYU is one of the big boys, but I think my point here is, we as Cougar fans, myself as a media member, I still get stuck sometimes thinking about little old BYU. And I've used this phrase many a time on this podcast. And I know Mark, my good friend up there in Idaho, is going to laugh at this because he's made me a shirt that says it. Do more with more. Because in the past, BYU is very proud to do, more with less. BYU has that more, and they need to utilize it. And we, speaking about all of us, listening and or watching this podcast, need to understand that BYU is no longer the little engine that could. They are now a true Leviathan. They have the money to make an impact in college football, and we need to adjust our mindset to understand that, hey, you know what? If they're going to pick off our coordinator, why don't we just look around and see if we can find another one out there on the market? Yes, I know that BYU is still a unique institution. It's still affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yes, it takes a certain person or a certain type of people that want to embrace everything BYU entails, being a church-affiliated school that very much does live by the standards set forth by the Church of Jesus Christ. But I think that the fact that BYU now can combine top-shelf Power 4 type money, along with, boasting a pretty darn good football program. BYU just played in the Big 12 title game, folks. BYU hadn't played in a title game since the crazy days of the 16-team WAC in 1997 and 96 and 97. It's been many, many years since BYU played in a title game. And yes, they lost that game, but their trajectory, it's going up. Well, I guess I'm doing this on Twitter or social media. It's going up. And we've got to embrace the fact that I think that Kalani Sitake has got this on an upward trajectory, and you can guarantee that he has no interest in watching it backslide if he can help it. The talent that's coming in, the coaches that have been around BYU for many, many years, including Jay Hill, have all been critical to the success that BYU has had early on in its run as a Big 12 conference member. But BYU fans, and even myself, like I said, as a media member and a podcast host, need to kind of embrace that, hey, yeah, BYU can play with the big boys. They can compete with the big boys. Yes, we're watching a defensive coordinator get plucked away by one of the biggest of the big boys in Michigan with Jay Hill off to Ann Arbor. But BYU can very much think that, hey, we can get right back into the race, find somebody out there on the market and bring them in and put them in a position where they absolutely could take that baton and, in theory, take it further than Jay Hill even took it. Now, I'm not trying to denigrate Jay Hill because I said Jay Hill's been an absolute revelation. He's been absolutely critical to BYU's run in the Big 12 so far. But you look at it and say, you know what? Added resources obviously have aided BYU in getting to this level. BYU for so many years never had a fully funded strength and conditioning staff. Think about that. Ryan Phillips, and now he has got a full complement of, I think it's at least 4, if not 5, assistant strength and conditioning coaches. They have a sports science team headed by Colby Clausen and Dr. Skylar Main, who, let's be blunt, Jeff Hansen pointed this out. If you look at BYU's depth chart from game 1 to game 14 this year, was it 21 of the 22 that started game 1 were available for game 14? Do you know how rare that is in college football? You know how expensive that is to, maintain that level of readiness and availability? Yeah, it requires top shelf strength and conditioning. That's stuff that BYU's invested in. That's just kind of one peek behind the curtain of the added investment BYU has made into its football program. So understand that, yes, losing Jay Hill, it does sting a little bit because, yeah, you don't want to see programs taking your coordinators. But I think in some ways, it's a kind of a testament to what BYU has built under Kalani Sitake. And now you turn around, take the money that Jay Hill won't be making and go and find somebody else of equal, if not maybe better caliber, you hope, and bring them in and set them up to, once again, further the mission, the aims, and the overall goals of the BYU football program. This team, absolutely, speaking of 2025, wanted to play in the college football playoff. They had a goal to make it to the Big 12 title game and win the Big 12 title. They got pretty darn close to all of that. But now it's the next step. Can they take the next step next year and really do punch their ticket into the playoff field? That's all out there for BYU. And there's a lot of talent returning. Yes, there's some talent departing, and we'll get more into that as the offseason progresses and the transfer portal really gets going here. But I think that the trajectory for BYU is going up. And I think all of us, like I said, myself included, need to, act accordingly and understand that BYU is no longer that little itty bitty program that's at the feet of the Wasatch Mountains that seems to just be that plucky upstart. No, we've got resources at BYU that have been brought to bear, and it's actually set BYU up for some pretty impressive success and hopefully even more success in the days to come. All right, coming up next. Why do I believe that the transfer portal is not going to be as harsh to BYU as some of you might think it could be with, coaches like Jay Hill departing BYU? I'll explain my reasoning next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, Friday nights on FanDuel are going to be absolutely awesome, and FanDuel is making them even better because the NBA, right before the games tip off, they have a new way to kick off the weekend, what they're calling their NBA Happy Hours. Your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app just before the action starts on Friday evenings from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. That is 4 to 5:30 Mountain Time. They have become appointment viewing with the NBA Happy Hour. If you open the FanDuel app during that hour, you're getting something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. You also can check out the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect right before the games and right before the weekend starts, and adds an extra energy to Friday night basketball without you having to overthink it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's happening during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're enjoying your holiday period, because this is kind of one of those periods, it's a little bit of a lull. A lot of people not working, but hey, I have promised you guys I do this podcast every single day. So thank you to all of you. Hope you had a fantastic Christmas, had a fantastic weekend, and are looking forward to an incredible new year upcoming this week. And hope you all are doing great out there in Cougar Nation. All right. So before we go here, Jay Hill departing BYU is going to have a ripple effect. And a lot of that extends in many people's minds to how many players does he pluck away from BYU to go with him to Michigan? I have stated this position before on this podcast, but I'll reiterate it here that I believe that the BYU football program is one of the more transfer portal proof programs that exists in all of college football. And that may sound like poppycock to some of you, and I understand that, but let me try and rationalize and explain further what I mean. What BYU is about, and speaking of a church school that's affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Kalani Sitake has made it very, very painfully clear that BYU and their football program are going to represent Brigham Young University, obviously, on the football field, but also be a light off of the field and be an extension of, the missionary arm of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They stand for more when they play for BYU football, speaking of these players, more than just the football player that they are. They stand for a program that obviously espouses the ideals, the tenets, the beliefs, the standards, everything that comes with the LDS church. And with that, when you buy into that, it seems like you understand that it means just that much more than just a paycheck or going to a program. Yes, there are programs out there that I believe are pretty portal proof because honestly, why would you want to leave those programs? I get all that. I'm thinking of the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Texases, the Alabamas of the world. The guys that leave those programs are guys who just can't find a way up the depth chart to get on the field. BYU has not lost a lot of top shelf players in recent years. I'm talking like the top of the top. Like we're talking bona fide A1 type starters in recent seasons with the portal. Because I think BYU, when they recruit guys, they have to find a pretty unique fit of an individual to come to BYU. I'm not saying that guys don't leave because look at last year. Keelan Marion, Harrison Taggart went on to be starters at the Power 4 level in the case of Keelan Marion at Miami and Taggart at Cal. But BYU, they don't lose as many of those guys as any other programs the caliber of Brigham Young University because, as I believe it to be, BYU, it means just that much more. And that may sound like a homerific take, but I think the proof is in the pudding out there. I would expect a guy, and it's been pretty widely rumored, that Falatau Satuala, who's been very open about why Jay Hill has been critical to getting him to BYU and obviously developing him into the breakout star he was this season. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Falatau Satuala follows a guy like Jay Hill to Michigan. But beyond that, I don't think of really any other player. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I'm not really thinking of any other player on BYU's defense that once again, Jay Hill coordinated to a top 25 caliber level annually during his time at BYU. I just don't see any other than that are like, that's a Jay Hill guy. Maybe there are. Maybe there are more guys out there than I realize. And if you know of those guys, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know who they are so I can monitor them as the portal window gets ready to open here on January 2nd. But a lot of these guys are bought into what Kalani Sitake is all about, and more importantly, what BYU is all about. And that's why I believe, once again, that BYU is one of the more portal-proof schools there is, I should say, in the entire country. Yes, we have seen the McKenzie brothers, who are BYU legacy guys, both announced they intend to enter the transfer portal. Speaking of wide receiver and Dominique, and obviously cornerback / special teams ace Marcus, they have both announced over this past month they intend to enter the transfer portal. Jake Griffin announced a reserve offensive lineman that he plans on leaving. There's at least one more I'm thinking of off the top of my head, but expect a handful more to go. But they're going to be more reserve type players who are probably looking for more playing time, or if they are a starting caliber player, hey, maybe they're looking for a paycheck, and maybe the revenue share and the overall agreement they have with them in BYU is not to their liking, and maybe that's pushing them out the door. But as Kalani Sitake has said multiple times, if you're coming here just for a paycheck, speaking of BYU, I don't really want you here. Kalani wants it to mean more than just collecting money as a mercenary, for lack of a better term, to play football and represent Brigham Young University. Kalani knows what BYU stands for. He absolutely radiates that in everything that he does. How incredible was it for him in the post-game on the stage down there at the Pop-Tarts Bowl, essentially bear testimony of what he believes in when it comes to Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, and why this program tries to espouse those ideals. And I know some of you are not religious, not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, don't have any interest in that, but but I think the vast majority of who I've talked to personally about the fact that you're still a BYU fan in spite of all that, you understand that it's kind of inextricably linked to the church and the mission and the aims of what the church is trying to do. That's why I believe, once again, that if you come to BYU, you understand, at least you should. If you don't, it's kind of on you at that point, it feels like, what BYU is all about. Yeah, the BYU experience is not for everybody, but by and large, I think if you go down the BYU rosters over the many, many years that BYU football has been playing, 101 seasons in total now, I think the vast majority of the guys who have suited up and played in the blue and white will say that BYU is part of who they are. And that's what you hope that a football program stands for. And especially in a crazy changing time that we're watching college football really become, it's nice that BYU does mean just that much more. It may not mean a lot more, but it means, like I said, just a little bit more. And a lot of guys, I think, buy into that ethos or that, I don't know, that way of life. And when they play for BYU, they understand that they're playing more than just the school that they're playing for. They're representing an entire faith that is literally worldwide. It has fans far and wide. This podcast can attest to that. Those of you who are both international, spread around the United States, you guys check in from all corners of the globe with this podcast. And it screams to exactly the reach that BYU football has. So while guys will be leaving, because I'm not going to say there aren't. No, there are guys who already plan to enter the portal. There will be more guys to come who plan to enter the portal from BYU. But understand that I think from my vantage point, the portal losses, I think, will be relatively small, and they won't be nearly as dire or as drastic as I believe they could be with another football program that loses a top shelf coordinator the caliber of Jay Hill. So this has been a very Jay Hill-centric podcast, but for good reason, because he has been a really important cog into the success that BYU has had over the past 2 seasons in particular, but more importantly, setting them up for hopeful future success. But understand that I think BYU, they're in a great spot right now, and trust that Kalani Sitake, the fact that he decided to pull back from the brink of leaving for Penn State and said, you know what? Home is where the heart is, and my heart's in Provo, Utah. Let's trust he's get the job done, and he'll keep leading BYU to even better days than we've enjoyed the past 24 months or so already. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. I truly do appreciate all of you guys for your support. As always, if you have not done so already, please consider joining the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. And if you want to be a part of it, it's really simple. Go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to join today and get the inside scoop via all access tier with the one-on-one text access you can get with myself. You get the ad-free episodes and obviously the Discord server access, plus a whole lot more. So check it out. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. But once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. We say it all the time on this podcast, but we're serious about it. Now go make your second listen over on the Locked On College Football feed. Check out what Spencer McLaughlin is doing with Locked On College Football. He's doing a great job with that. And obviously, come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.